Hello, everyone, from my side. And thank you so much all for being here. And of course, a big shout out to the members of the Social Media Cultures Network for their big efforts. It is indeed my great pleasure to be presenting today, bringing a few insights from my doctoral research completed in the context of the Horizon 2020 Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions within the project Participatory Memory Practices at the University of Hamburg. Currently, as Sarah mentioned, I'm serving as a research project manager and open infrastructure specialist at OpenAIRE AMKE, championing an open and fair data ecosystem. So my talk today, as you can see by the title, will address the monopolization of knowledge by large-scale commercial platforms. And I will be critically reflecting on that, while later I will attempt to discuss open and participatory approaches. So in this age now dominated by large commercial platforms like Facebook and Instagram, Meta and Instagram, cultural heritage institutions face this kind of a pivotal moment where these platforms have broadened our reach and reshaped audience expectations. The digital landscape indeed offers extensive opportunities for interaction, yet it is important to evaluate the nature of such engagement. Specifically, the value of actions like using, for example, the like feature, or reposting content or commenting comes into questions. Are these forms of participation genuinely meaningful? Currently, cultural heritage institutions navigate the balance between expanding audience engagement and maintaining the authenticity of cultural narratives, striving for community engagement. The shift to large-scale commercial digital platforms poses questions about the dependency on tech giants and impacts institutional independence and sovereignty. Additionally, a significant gap in public's engagement in cultural knowledge production questions how open and indeed participatory these commercial indeed platforms actually are. So the domination of large-scale commercial platforms has established a digital normalcy that fetishizes nearly any kind of digital interaction for profiting purposes in the name of open, implying that the commercial services are to be used without charge. So, as I said, I will be critically assessing cultural heritage institutions' digital reliance, its effect on the governance and public engagement, as well as cultural knowledge production. And my goal is to identify these kind of strategies to close the participation gap, promoting more inclusive and collaborative approaches to cultural heritage productions through fair ways. So I will discuss a few basic aspects, as this seminar has like a broad audience. So to be able to understand this complexity, the complexity of the topic. So during the last decade, I'm sure you all are familiar with the fact that the internet flooded with platforms promised to kind of democratize and opening up access to knowledge and so on and so forth. And platforms are actually our technological and economic and social cultural configurations, which have helped in doing so, keeping this promise or not, we will see later. So they're not actually merely technical mediums. Essentially, they are a newly predominant type of business model. And while the term platform might conjure images of an egalitarian space where everyone stands on equal footing, the reality paints a different picture. These are in essence highly hierarchical ecosystems governed by distinct layers of authority, from the architects who design them to the enforcers who dictate the rules. So social media platforms have become critical infrastructures as users have been quite dependent to them. And to that respect, they shouldn't be exploiting their power. So Van Dijkbol and de Waal outline two main types of platforms in the digital world, the infrastructural and sectoral. So big companies like Google, Apple, Facebook, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft, known together as GAFA, run the kind of infrastructural platforms, which are like the backbone of the internet, supporting all other platforms and services. And these include things like search engines, social networks, and cloud services. Then there are the sectoral platforms, which focus on specific areas like, for example, news, transport, education. Think, for example, for like Airbnb. And these platforms rely on the infrastructure provided by GAFA and often don't own physical assets or produce content themselves. Instead, they connect users to services. However, this constellation can lead to a few companies having too much control, which can be a big problem for the fair competition and create power imbalance online. In the digital economy, two key processes stand out, and these are the datafication and commodification. The datafication turns our online actions and offline experiences into quantifiable data, while commodification transforms this data into something that can be sold. Everything from our activities to our emotions becomes a commodity. And these processes change how value is created, making personal data the new currency in today's economy, and highlighting the impact on our privacy and value for our digital footprint. So the ramifications of the domination of large-scale commercial platforms brought the emergence of a new form of capitalism, that of cognitive capitalism. The new phase of capitalism is based on the accumulation of immaterial capital, knowledges, cognitive work, innovation, emotions, and transform this into this kind of mode of production, as well as how knowledge is being organized, distributed, and consumed. And the exploitation of knowledge is catalyzed by open knowledge and open access movements that are thriving through cognitive capitalism. The ramifications of cognitive capitalism have led to the emergence of certain practices such as platform capitalism, surveillance capitalism, and attention mechanisms, which have been quantifying as well as analyzing user behavior and ultimately leading to the commercialization of the users and their data. I will now share with you the research design of the study. And the research problem that mobilized this work is twofold. Firstly, it was motivated by the fact that cultural heritage institutions have been heavily reliant on these platforms for the digital communication and engagement, where these platforms operate through non-transparent practices, and their values are not aligned with those values of cultural heritage institutions. And secondly, the participation gap in cultural knowledge production is quite wide, but I will not be delving too much into this last part, as I would like to focus more on social media platforms and not this time so much with regards to opening up knowledge through ways through, for example, APIs or licenses and other forms. So I'll be seeking open and fair ways to bridge the participation gap in the digital ecosystem through a framework that could be used within the social media platforms. And the research was designed to reflect the fluidity and interdisciplinary of the field and implemented multifaceted methods and perspectives to achieve this. The methodology is qualitative, combining expert interviews and the organization of the Institute colloquium, observations, and the implementation of grounded theory and a formative evaluation. So the Institute's colloquium that I organized, entitled Open Knowledge in the Heritage Sector, reflected dissemination, interpretation, and accessibility of knowledge, which I'm very happy that I saw also Douglas McCarthy is here with us today, which he was also part of the colloquium at this point in 2019, feels some time ago now. So the colloquium explored the state of the art in the field of open knowledge in the cultural heritage sector and extended to future potentialities in investigating the role and impact of digital economy in the cultural heritage sector. Also, I incorporated into the methodology observations I made in conferences and related events. I included three different events where I was extensively writing memos, acting as observations. And these events are the European Data Summit, Common Values for a Single Market, Wikimania 2019, and My Data 2019 conferences. Also, I conducted a secondment at Open Knowledge Finland in Helsinki, and more specifically the Open GLAM working group. And during my stay in Helsinki, I conducted 15 interviews, and in total, I conducted 23 in-depth interviews with 23 experts, including cultural heritage professionals, social innovators, service designers, open knowledge activists, university professors, and researchers on relevant domains. The participants were carefully selected based on their expertise at the intersection of cultural heritage institutions, digital technologies, and opening up knowledge to promote fairer practices in the digital economy. After the transcription of the interviews, I implemented grounded theory, which comprises of several different stages, but mainly focusing on coding the material with the software MaxQDA. But I will not delve into the specificities of the process in this seminar. And later I conducted also a formative evaluation in the shape of a focus group for the research findings, and it took place after the analysis of the collected data, aiming to aid participatory aspects. And for that reason, I constructed a focus group sample, including experts that I conducted an interview with, but also people who I didn't conduct an interview with. So I will now share some of the results and critically examine the domination of the platforms into cultural participation. So large-scale commercial platforms, essentially the big companies, are monopolizing knowledge production and hindering cultural participation through the opaque and obfuscate practices, while undermining healthy competition in the digital economy, affecting what and how something will be remembered. Opacity in terms of either the technology used or the way the business model operates, it dictates enclosure tactics and prescribes that commercial platforms are not open from the perspective of what the open knowledge movement and the open knowledge advocate consider as open. Indisputably, cultural heritage institutions are dependent to these platforms and, of course, striving to retain audience engagement through them and be digitally present. However, simultaneously, they can lose their voices as main actors and factors in producing cultural knowledge, where they are sidelined by commercial interests. Drawing from the analysis of the research findings, all the interviewees shared their concerns about the non-transparent and deceptive at times practices employed by commercial platforms, particularly regarding their obfuscate business model and algorithm functionality. There is a collective worry about the society's potential over-reliance on these platforms, which could lead to a future where users blindly can adhere to imposed norms. The dependency of cultural heritage institutions on these platforms for reaching their audiences is driven by limited resources and the platform's popularity for social interaction. This dependency underscores the profound and daily impact of such opaque practices on the creation and dissemination of knowledge as people increasingly turn to these platforms for various activities. I'm sharing here an interview quote on the non-transparent business model that Professor Ignat Schneider, a professor of political science at the University of Hamburg, shared with me during an interview we had in 2020. And I quote, "All these platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Google, their business model really relies on people spending a long time on their platforms. So there are some seductive mechanisms of making you click more, making you spend more time, having the next video already in place, and sometimes also relying on even more extreme political positions. They very much rely on emotions, strong emotions like outrage, because this is what binds people to the platform and binds people's time, and also other forms of resources. So in that respect, I think in terms of democracy, this is a very dangerous and very threatening, this kind of business model. So the thriving business model of a commercial platform is based on the monetization of users' data, their behaviors, and in that constellation, AI, and particularly, of course, algorithms are playing a crucial role. And the way commercial platforms' algorithms are working was critically discussed by 15 interviewees. Platforms thrive on a business model predicated on the monetization of user data and behaviors. At the core of this model lies a complex web of AI and algorithms. They are not just lines of code, they're arbiters of what information we see, interact with, and ultimately how we perceive the world around us. Interviewees were concerned about this heated topic, and so Susanna Kokinen, head of Aalto University Record Management Archive, critically assessed this and explored how big tech companies utilize opaque algorithms to filter content and shape knowledge production. Susanna perfectly illustrates this with a reflection on platforms' algorithms which tailor content based on commercial interests and user behavior, often diverging from the user's actual search intent. This practice, she argues, not only obscures the vast landscape of available information, but also fundamentally undermines the concept of openness that is crucial within cultural organizations. This brings us to the heart of our concern, the non-transparent practices of commercial platforms, like surveillance-driven algorithms, curate content that aligns with perceived users' preferences. And also already mentioned, this is calculated effort to capture user attention and ultimately profit. However, this strategy also means that users are often kept in the dark about perhaps the wealth of information available beyond the walled gardens of algorithmic suggestions. The implications of these practices are profound. They challenge the very notion of the internet as a democratic space of free knowledge exchange. And furthermore, they raise ethical questions about the role of commercial platforms in our society. So tech giants like GAFAM have crafted a business model that seemingly offers services for free, but at a substantial cost to user privacy as they monetize personal data. As discussed, Snyder highlighted this as a deceptive exchange, where convenience masks the true price, the user's privacy and attention. And this practice underscores a broader issue in the digital economics, the need for greater transparency and re-evaluation of what free really means, challenging the ethical boundaries of monetizing user engagement under degrees of openness. The digital economy, heavily influenced by neoliberal ideals, thrives on competition and encourages a free market approach. However, this competitive ethos conflicts with the principles and values of cultural heritage institutions, fostering openness, prioritized sharing, and collaboration. The rise of digital monopolies through anti-competitive practices challenges the coexistence of open knowledge with the market's competitive nature. These monopolies exemplified by tech giants not only stifle smaller competitors, but also contradict the ethos of openness by prioritizing profit over collaboration. And despite these regulations like antitrust laws, digital giants often bypass these through strategic acquisitions, further consolidating their market dominance. This can be illustrated, for example, with the case where Facebook, now Meta, bought and acquired Instagram and thereafter WhatsApp as well to eliminate them from competitors. And it is crucial to mention that both platforms, Instagram and WhatsApp, were incredibly successful before their acquisition by Facebook. And this scenario raises concerns about the sustainability of open knowledge in a market driven by profit and competition, and openness as a value, which it has been and is being fostered by cultural heritage institutions. And the study results points towards a longing for a shift towards more collaborative practices that align with the original values of the internet and the open source movement, openness and open knowledge movements. The discussion emphasizes the need for a balance between healthy competition and the foundational principles of openness and sharing to ensure a diverse and inclusive digital ecosystem. So considering being pragmatic in designing independent digital futures from large-scale commercial platforms, which is crucial aspect for the democratization of knowledge production, so kind of practices trying to push or beyond the commodification and monopolization of knowledge towards the ideas of cooperatives, where distributed modes of organization would aid in amplifying openness in the uses of data. And digital cooperatives owned and governed by the members offer a democratic alternative to the centralized profit-driven tech giants, ensuring equitable value distribution and data commons, treating data as a communal resource, promote open access and shared governance, facilitating innovation and informed decision-making while respecting privacy. And these models challenge the traditional digital ecosystem, advocating for a system where benefits are widely shared, not concentrating among a few. And this represents not just a technological or economic change, but a move towards a more inclusive, democratic digital future. And they could be a key in building a fairer digital ecosystem. But I will not delve too much into the digital cooperatives and digital commons. As I said before at the beginning of the presentation, would like to set a framework within the social media platforms reality. So just to continue a bit, to say that the production of knowledge in this digital ecosystem is, of course, codependent to the infrastructure and the users and the staff of cultural heritage organizations and technology use and the business model. So the motivational aspect. So everything is in a kind of an assemblage, like a digital ecosystem. And consequently, memory making is codependent to all these ecological aspects. And this constellation describes how something would be remembered and also by whom. So as the digital cultural heritage landscape is ever-changing and it is proposed to diverge from digital monopolies or digital gatekeepers, I rather encouraging and fostering people to be active participants in the decision-making processes concerning the co-production in the digital ecosystem. So enhancing openness and countering big tech's dominance through two models of knowledge stewardship, the participatory and a collective framework. Both approaches advocate for user empowerment, collaborative knowledge production, and transparent democratic decision-making regarding data use. And these models prioritize legal, privacy, ethical, and technological considerations, particularly focusing on data rights and sovereignty. Within these frameworks, stewards can play a crucial role. In the participatory framework, they can act as facilitators, fostering a culture of collaboration and co-creation among users and cultural institutions, and help democratizing the ecosystem. In the collective one, stewards serve as facilitators, empowering communities to navigate and influence data policies collectively, standing against these monopolistic practices. So in that sense, they can reinforce an open and fair approach to social media engagement, bridging community engagement and institutional goals, implementing strategies that reflect democratic values and collective governance. Their efforts could ensure the digital ecosystem is not only participatory, but also a reflection of shared knowledge and inclusive practices. This envisions a future where digital spaces can foster vibrant communities of inclusivity and collective empowerment. Undeniably, social media platforms have indeed revolutionized how we engage with communities and share knowledge. But we have to remember, and we, meaning cultural heritage experts or enthusiasts, that the platforms are not panacea. The heart of cultural heritage institutions isn't the digital, of course, it's to serve their communities deeply, catering to their varied needs with empathy and inclusion. But here's the catch. As we lean heavily into the digital, we risk handing over the keys to our cultural narratives to the giants of the tech world, the big techs. And this phenomenon not only narrows the spectrum of our narratives, it also risks muting those voices that diverge from the prevailing digital paradigm, thereby fostering a culture that is increasingly uniform and less diverse. So, what's the way forward, you may ask? So we must look beyond the digital veneer and recommit to our core missions, serving our communities. And this means stepping out, listening to what they truly need, elevate diverse voices, and making sure everyone can access the rich tapestry of our cultural heritage. And so in doing so, we can counteract the centralization of knowledge, fostering cultural heritage that's democratic, it's diverse, it's vibrant, and so it's truly inclusive. Let's not just share culture, let's try to co-create it with our communities, ensure that every voice has a chance to shape our collective narrative. And so the strategies for this kind of engagement could be engaged directly with communities to understand and address these diverse needs, create spaces for diverse voices, ensuring equitable access to cultural heritage, and challenge the centralization of knowledge, promoting a democratic approach to cultural preservation and production and co-creation. And handle social media platforms, the big ones, as a way to achieve participation and co-creation aspects. But to counteract the monopolization of knowledge within these digital platforms, it's imperative to embed and foster values such as openness, care, and participation, where the steward could aid. These values act as a cornerstones of resilience, challenging the concentrated control of information, dissemination, and ensuring a more equitable access to knowledge. For example, by prioritizing care, we commit to understanding and addressing the nuanced needs of diverse communities, ensuring that digital engagement is inclusive. Openness invites a culture of transparency and free exchange of ideas, breaking down the barriers erected by these monopolistic practices. And it encourages a multiplicity of voices and narratives, enriching the cultural tapestry with varied perspectives. Participation, perhaps most crucially, empowers individuals to contribute to and shape the digital ecosystem. It democratizes the creation and curation of knowledge, allowing for a collaborative and co-creative process. And this active involvement of community members not only dilutes the concentration of power in the hands of a few, but also fosters a sense of ownership and belonging among participants. So together, these values form a robust framework for resisting the monopolization of knowledge. So embedding openness, care, participation into the fabric of digital platforms, cultural heritage institutions could champion a more resilient, democratic, and inclusive digital landscape. And this approach not only safeguards against the homogenization of culture, but also ensures that the digital realm serves as a vibrant and accessible space for all to explore, learn, contribute, and co-create. So stewards, in that sense, could be instrumental in steering cultural heritage institutions towards embodying key values of openness, transparency, collaboration, and of course, ethics. They advocate for broader access to collections and knowledge, ensuring the public can engage deeply with cultural heritage. By fostering transparency, stewards build trust through clear communication about institutional practices and decisions, collaborative initiatives both within and outside the institution, and enrich cultural heritage institutions' contributions to society, promoting shared stewardship of cultural assets. But the latter could also happen outside social media in that sense. Or we can discuss this after the Q&A. So from an ethical standpoint, stewards navigate through intricate dilemmas with unwavering integrity, honoring the multitude of cultures entrusted to their guardianship. Through such dedicated endeavors, these custodians aid cultural heritage institutions towards inclusivity, ethical integrity, where the essence of cultural heritage not only flourishes, but also enlightens. So to finish my talk today, I will talk very shortly and briefly about embracing these open source platforms. So in advancing towards a digital horizon that champions equity and fairness and openness, the embrace of open source platforms like Mastodon, for example, or Blue Sky, and there are a lot of other fairer practices out there, can mark a pivotal moment towards democratizing digital spaces. And these platforms diverge from profit-driven models, prioritizing transparency, user empowerment, and privacy, and thus heralding a more inclusive digital ecosystem. The allure of these platforms extends beyond the technology to embody a culture of active participation and collaboration, making digital spaces not just more accessible, but resilient against the knowledge monopolization and the marginalization of voices, the potential marginalization of voices. And this shift towards open source platforms is not merely a technological upgrade, but a deliberate choice of values that emphasize community, openness, and collective action. And it promises a reimagined online world that could be democratic or more democratic, equitable, and truly reflective of our diverse experiences, steering us towards a digital future that it is authentically for and by people, free from monopolistic practices and shadows. And that's all by my side. And thank you so much for listening.